Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today at MCC North Express. We are with our Home Instead Aging Well series, and today we're going to talk about financial planning, personal finance and retirement planning. For many seniors, financial planning means having the confidence that you need to have the funds to enjoy retirement without the burden of financial stress. But what does that look like? Today we have some experts here to talk to us about that subject. We have Erin Wood from Carson Wealth and Chandra Wilkins from Home Instead.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about this very important topic. So I guess, Chandra, I would love to start with you and just ask you, why do you think it's difficult for adults to talk to their aging parents about money?
I think the whole aging process and talking about money with their parents reverses the roles that the children play, and the parents feel like they're not the parent anymore and the child's trying to be the parent. And it's just a complex decision about how your parent is going to age in place for the parent and for the child, and it's deeply personal for both parties. So I think that's why it becomes very complex and it can be very stressful.
Now, Erin, when approaching this topic, do you have adults and their parents come see you at the same time, or what are some successful ways to have this conversation?
We absolutely have held family meetings, and it's not an uncommon thing. Many individuals don't know how to talk to their parents or even their grandparents about what should happen next. How do we have that conversation without making someone feel small or lose like they're losing control? And so frequently getting everyone in the room, having a non-biased person to help start the conversation definitely can help. And so we do encourage people to come in together, and if they're not comfortable with that, helping them with ideas of when is a light entry into the topic of, sometimes you'll see something with a neighbor or a family member, and if you can say, here's what's happening to this person, what would you like to have happen? It's a softer way to enter the conversation.
So how do you know when it's time to broach the subject? How do you broach the subject of it might be time for parents to have some assistance with their financial planning or their money handling?
I personally have seen a few, I would say, key indicators. Some of them are the difficulty when they're having a hard time remembering something. It's the, I forgot to pay this bill, or I didn't see this come through the mail. And sometimes there's big indicators of those forgetfulness happening. But other times, it's a lot softer. It's just maybe they want to do something else. They don't feel the need to be in control of those things anymore. I've been very fortunate to see all of my grandparents live into their 80s and 90s, and so I've seen it happen with all of them. But my husband's grandfather's 100, and he's been living on his own, doing his own thing, and he had the ability to say, you know what, I'm done. And that's our golden wish for all of us, is for someone to say they're done. But lots of times it's the small things, and you have to take those small indicators and add them up over time.
Wow, and I like how you said really just having a light entry into the conversation. Chandra, can you talk a little bit about that 40-70 rule, how Home Instead recommends that there's this 40-70 rule when talking about this subject?
Yeah, so 70 is the parents still are independent and they have a voice in their decisions, and they can hopefully talk productively and actively with their children about what they want as they age and approach retirement. 40 is, you've come into your own, you've gone through your 20s, you've gone through your 30s, you've got some life experiences, and so you can relate more to your parent. And I think that's what we mean by the 40-70 rule. Like I said earlier, we know relationships vary between families and can be complex and personal, but that 40-70 is just, you have the 40-year-old who has the life experiences, so they can relate more to their parent, and their parent is still independent enough to talk about how they see themselves in 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
Well, speaking of complex, a lot of adults are helping their aging parents financially. So really, how can you do that while safeguarding your own finances when you're trying to prepare for kids going to college and preparing for your own retirement?
I would leave that up to the experts.
So, the idea of the 40-70 rule is a fantastic one because that's that soft entry point, right? Like we were just talking about, they're still in control of their own finances. And those time periods are, again, that idea of what do you want to have happen? The 70-year-olds frequently have either taken care of their parents, they either had to go through a really difficult situation, or it's been a positive one. And both of those will give you an indicator of how you feel about it, right? What you've seen happen gives you your perception. And so that inherited financial bias is one that all of us have. And so if your inherited financial bias is one where families don't talk about money, that soft entry is going to be really important. If you have an inherited financial bias where you know that you're going to have to help take care of someone and now it's a financial responsibility, that's been passed down for generations. And so it's okay to be like, I saw you do this with grandma and grandpa. What are your expectations of me? What is it you want help with? And helping them guide that conversation in the fact that they're not there yet, but it's a good time to start entering the conversation of how they feel about it and how maybe what they've already done in the past is putting them in a future place of what they want to see differently.
And the soft conversations can start with, hey, mom, dad, where do you keep your bills at? Where do you have the deed to the house? Those soft, just in case something would happen, where would I find this paperwork should something come up? That's the entryway. And then you just build off of that. Maybe when they show you, you can start the next step and so on and so forth.
Well, there are definitely a lot of factors that affect financial planning and planning for retirement. And one of the biggest factors affecting all of us right now is COVID-19. So can you talk a little bit about what's changed in the midst of this ongoing pandemic?
Yeah, for the individuals who have either delayed work or been forced into work, those are two situations where many people weren't really planning on retiring in the way that they retired. But the pandemic, as it continues to stretch on, has bigger impact for what does that mean for in-home health care, the assisted livings, the future of long-term care. We've seen the lack of being able to have social communication when the long-term care facilities close down. And I've talked to a lot of clients who are saying they want to stay home for as long as they possibly can so that they can have those human connections with their family still. The idea of the portals, where Facebook portals are a fantastic innovation that has come out of these, and we've seen individuals be able to keep that continual human contact through those. But the idea of the pandemic is changing the way that not only we're able to go out into the community, but how do you get groceries? How do you talk to your healthcare provider? If you are an elderly person who has a weaker immune system, you have to find some of those alternative care options to be able to still have a good emotional state in life. And that's the most important thing. Money can buy us a lot, but it can't buy us happiness if we can't connect with each other.
And Chandra, what would you add to that from the caregiver perspective of how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting our seniors?
I think our caregivers, the non-paid caregivers, which would be daughters, sons, are feeling, they're feeling isolated themselves, and then their parents are feeling isolated, and there's a disconnect. And so they're having to find new ways to communicate securely with their family members, but still feel like it's a personal connection. And we're seeing independent and assisted living still using the windows, which nobody wants to do that. So we've implemented some technology. We have a telehealth pad that our families can connect visually with their family members. I was talking to a client the other day, and her mom was like this, looking in the pad, and she said, hey mom, you can stand up. And they had a nice laugh about that, and she helped her mom cook a dinner, going over the recipe and stuff with her through our telehealth pad. And then they can use that pad to talk to their healthcare providers, medication reminders. The daughter or the son can put a reminder up of when they need to take their medications and stuff like that. So we are working really hard to make that telehealth pad a more personal interaction so that they get that personal feel and communication with their loved one. So. With
Well, I
COVID,
think-
yeah, it's changed a lot of things.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's called for really innovation and creativity in how to learn to do different things as we're dealing with the pandemic. What would you say are some precautions for aging adults or those nearing retirement in the midst of the pandemic?
From a healthcare standard is just to make sure that they're aware of any healthcare conditions that they may have, to take the precautions. I have to giggle. I see some seniors at the extreme still, staying home, not doing anything, to the other seniors who are like, we've been through so much, we're going out. So we want them to be independent and live very vibrant, healthy lives. So we go over the CDC recommendations. Please wear a mask, if appropriate, glove. Everybody knows, wash your hands. You can't seem to do it enough. For 20 seconds, say the alphabet a couple times when you wash your hands. Those types of things. Make sure that if they can have groceries delivered and their medications delivered, that they do that. And they can do that with no personal contact. Usually the delivery driver can let them know they're coming to the door, they can leave the package, and the aging adult can grab that type of thing. So that's what we're doing.
What about precautions as you're looking toward retirement, financial precautions? As you look at this aging population, there's just a wide variety. You have those that are still working and planning for retirement. Some are planning to maybe retire at 62 and how that affects things. You're told, hey, just leave it, the market will recover. Well, depending on where you are, do you have time for the market to recover? So what precautions can you take in this volatile, ever-evolving, changing market?
Yeah, the market will always change. And one of the things that is hard for all of us is to realize that we're not going to use all of our money tomorrow. So no matter if it's a good market or a bad market, most of us are going to have 20 or 30, possibly 40 years of retirement. And so we are going to go through multiple bull and bear markets in that time period. The best thing I can always tell everyone is to make sure they're staying diversified. And we've heard it, don't put all your eggs in one basket. But the idea of what does that really mean? Well, it's making sure that you still have some equities for growth. You still have some fixed income for your safety measures. You have cash available. It doesn't matter whether you are young and just starting to save money or you're in your retirement years. You need that emergency fund to get us through these situations like right now. We've seen people, like I said, who maybe retired that they weren't planning on because of COVID situations. Well, having those emergencies for mortgages or credit cards or healthcare expenses, that doesn't ever go away. And so that cash envelope or the cash safety net, whatever someone wants to call it, that will be there through the whole time, and then making sure that you're staying ahead of inflation. One of the things I've had so many people say to me is, I don't want to be eating the dog food or the cat food. And yeah, it's a funny joke, but it's also a fear all of us have. Will we run out of money? And making sure that we have enough to stay the course and stay ahead of inflation is an important part of that, and having equities as part of that equation needs to be an amount that will get you to your goal without putting you in a place of so much risk that's uncomfortable.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned not running out of money. I knew someone who his parents had a financial advisor, and the financial advisor told them, look, you can't take it with you. And so the parents just began spending their money, and they did run out. They weren't able to sustain their lifestyle.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's the worst case scenario, right? Is people have three things. They're afraid to spend any of it. They spend it all, and they're going to live their life. I've definitely had clients tell me that they're going to go to the grave with not a dollar in their savings account, and that is an actual goal for them. For most of us, we don't want to be a burden. That is the biggest thing. I don't want to be a burden on my children or my grandchildren, and making sure that part of their financial plan has that safety net in there for what if you live an extra 5 years? What if you live an extra 10? Are you okay with the fact that you're spending at a rate that you're going to run out? For most of us, we wouldn't be comfortable with that. So I would encourage everyone to say, okay, this looks great if I live to this long, but what happens if I live another 10 years?
This is an election year, and so I'm just wondering, what does that mean for retirement? Does it have any effect being an election year?
It has an effect for, I think, anxiety and fear, for sure. We go through elections every couple years, whether we're electing Congress and Senate or a president. They will always happen, and with that, there's always fear of what changes there are to come. But the same idea of staying diversified across your investments is important to stay diversified across your tax vehicles, your savings, your tax deferred, your tax-free sources. Making sure you're diversified in all areas of life will help you no matter what the changes are in the upcoming laws, regulations to come.
Chandra, what do you hear from the caregiver side? Like you said, we have paid caregivers and we have unpaid caregivers, the wives, the sons, the daughters, the moms. As far as the election goes, is there that same sense of fear and uncertainty?
I think it's uncertainty. We get asked a lot, do we know what Medicare is going to look like if this person or that person gets elected? And the answer is no, we don't, but we recommend the same things, you know. Read about in November, I believe, October, November, seniors can pick a new Medicare plan. So we just recommend when the notices come out from Medicare that's coming up, that you read the various plans and have a conversation about what's going to be the best plan for you, because there are several different plans. And just stay educated on the appropriate web pages. And sometimes it's okay to tell your parents to turn the news off.
I have told that to both my parents.
So yeah, so we have a lot of those conversations, and yeah, we just, you know, stay up to date on doctor's appointments and focus on everyday life and what's going on now, but educate and be aware of what could be coming in the future is our best recommendation.
And a big part of that is the prescription healthcare plan.
Yes.
Like, that is one of the biggest financial parts of the Medicare re-enrollment every year, is what prescription plan makes the most sense, because they change every year. And as generics become more common, especially with seniors, they have a tendency to miss that there is a generic available or that there is a better prescription drug plan for them.
Yeah, and we recommend that once a quarter, if not at least annually, all people go to their pharmacist and say, here's my medication list. Is there anything I should be aware of? We have found that some seniors are taking 2 drugs that they could only take one for one condition, or, you know, they have similar drugs for one condition, that type of thing. So we recommend that they do that, and they actively talk with their pharmacist about any allergic reactions, or if there's generics available to them, or various discounts.
Fantastic. So one question that I had about it being an election year is there a typical way that markets respond during an election year?
I would say there's a typical way that people always respond, and whether it's one side or the other, there's always that fear. And people, you know, we get a lot of calls right now of what should I be doing? Should I be moving things around? That idea, again, of staying diversified is one that we always try to help people with. There's a few things that are on the radar right now that people are talking about a lot. It's the idea that will the dividend and interest be switched so that it gets taxed as ordinary income? That is a perfect example of a tax change that could be a big impact to a lot of people. And so I always tell everyone that same idea of the tax control, whether you're putting your money in the equity markets, the tax-free markets, whatever it is, when you look at where most of us save, it's in our 401ks, our IRAs, and that becomes our biggest bucket of money, and that's taxed at ordinary income. The other place where most of us save our money is in the non-qualified. So that's your checking, your savings, your normal brokerage accounts, and those are taxed at dividend and interest, and that is at a lower rate for most individuals. If that goes to an ordinary income, that ends up being that all of your income's taxed as one, and that's a big change for a lot of individuals. The area that we don't see most clients saving is in the tax-free bucket. It's the Roth 401ks, the Roth IRAs, the muni bonds, certain types of life insurance fall into there, and that category is a harder one to fill. And so if you can start focusing on that as you're younger, or for those individuals right now who are maybe in retirement and have had a low tax year, they might have the ability to do some Roth conversions or IRA conversions into Roths. Those are some great ideas to be talking to their advisors about right now.
So you mentioned the tax, some of the information regarding taxes, and some of that fear about a new administration. So what are some types of reforms or some types of things that could come up when you have a new administration?
Well, I think, one of the big ones that I have seen just in my career change extensively is estate tax. We've seen that go from very low rates to unlimited rates to, bounce back down. And so the estate tax is one that definitely is going to be looked at. Social Security, how much of our income can be taxed by Social Security, or how much income can we make per year to put into Social Security will be another one that will be looked at for sure. And then the taxability, like I said, of dividends and interest are all, I would say, on the table at this point.
So 50 years ago, IRAs didn't exist, and before that, Social Security didn't exist. And now there's a lot of talk about there's less money available for Social Security. So what would you guess that the future might look like for Social Security for people in those different boxes as they're looking to retire?
Yeah, the easiest one that I think individuals look to first is the cost of living adjustment in the Social Security. And so that amount that it increases per year, that is an easy one for us to either no longer include, which again, the cost of bread today is not the cost of bread in the future. And so if that cost of living adjustment goes away, that is a way for solvency to increase that percentage, that chance. But it's something that is not good for the people who are receiving it. Some of the other things that are on the table that are high probabilities is what age can you start collecting? Will they start putting higher ages on that? Is been in there for a while. Will they collect more income from us contributing? And so right now there's a cap. Last year was about $137,000 of income per person is where it was capped at. That generally goes up every year, but will that cap go away and that you will contribute forever? And then, one of the other ones we don't know is what is the future birth rate and how many more individuals will we have in the future contributing to Social Security? But we do know that it has some issues, and they've been saying about 2035, and that number seems to get closer and closer every year. And so it's not going to be one silver bullet that's going to solve it. They're going to have to look at combinations of doing multiple things to get it back on the right track.
So right now, some Americans can retire at age 62. Others wait to the traditional time to retire. But how can that affect you depending on when you do decide to retire?
Yeah, so for most individuals, at this point, they're getting closer to the 66 retirement age. It was at 65. That will continue to go up. And then you can wait till 70. So if you take anything below your full retirement age, you will take a penalty for taking it earlier. It's that life expectancy that they do the math backwards, and so you'll get less. For those who take it before their full retirement age, a special for spousal benefits, those can have some bad effects for the spouse who is expecting to get benefits off those higher amounts, because if you take it early, that does continue with the spouse at those lower rates. But every year you go past your full retirement age, it's approximately an 8% increase year over year until you get to the age 70. And so one of the things, if you can wait, it's a positive thing. That's a guaranteed 8% rate of return. There's no guaranteed in the equity markets, and the fixed income markets are definitely not paying that. And so for individuals who can wait, it can be a very prosperous one. And then that 8% increase again goes onto your spousal benefits once you pass.
Erin, have the rules changed during this time? Is what is realistic now different from what it was before we went on lockdown in March?
Is it realistic around the Social Security?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things we have seen, because people have been forced into retirement sooner than they were planning, there are people who had to change their Social Security plans. And that does definitely happen. Every good plan, has detours in it in life. And so I would say the pandemic has caused people to take Social Security in many cases where they've lost that job sooner than what they were planning. We've seen a lot of individuals who were forced into an early retirement, and for whatever reason, maybe it was just a few gap years that they were planning on retiring in the next 12 months or 18 months, finding another job for a short amount of time period was not realistic for them, and so they have chose to take their Social Security earlier. And if they were planning on taking a delayed Social Security, maybe pushing it up a little bit, especially depending on their taxability, sometimes that makes more sense versus taking it out of some of the other accounts.
When we talk about behavior, your area of expertise is really behavioral finance. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and what role that plays in planning for your finances?
It is probably the biggest role. So behavioral finance is, I would say, probably my first love of really figuring out finance. It's that, how do you figure out your own history? How do you figure out how to change a history that maybe has not been, perfect? Most of us, like I said, have inherited financial behaviors from our family, and some of those behaviors go back generations and generations. I recently just posted an article in Kiplinger's about mapping out your family tree and taking that family tree and putting everyone on it, and what are the reoccurring financial themes of your family. Are they willing to talk about money, or is money a sin that you don't talk about in your family? Is it common that you've had divorces and you've had single moms? Have you had people who've had bankruptcy, or people who've always lived in debt? Those who are fearful of spending anything. I mean, we've all seen the Ebenezer Scrooge who won't get rid of his money, and he can't look at humanity, and we have others who will give and not take care of themselves. And so starting with that family tree of what has my history been, and what did I pick up because of that? And sometimes we have a tendency to do the 180 and run the other way of trying to be different, and that has its own fears too. I was talking recently with a woman who has the shopping. Like, she shops and shops and shops, and it's not about the idea of actually the shopping. It was about the idea of trying to find a stress relief. Well, she didn't realize she was actually doing it, and so when we started pointing out that she was really just shopping to shop because she was stressed, well, now she's meditating. It's just a different way of figuring out patterns and helping someone realize where can they make small differences. A lot of people think it's about trying to change someone, and it's not about changing someone. It's just about understanding yourself so you can make good decisions about your finances and find those little places where you can tweak them and make you feel more confident, have more conviction about the choices you're making.
Well, you mentioned one of the steps is having that family tree and identifying behaviors. Mm-hmm. And along with that, a lot of times you have beliefs about things, which is why people behave that way. But what are some of those steps that you can do to kind of start identifying what might be a positive or a negative behavior?
Yeah, so I will give you some examples in my own life even. So when I went through my family tree, I have two very young parents. I was the first one who had went away to college, and with my parents, they were definitely pushing me towards that idea that education was important, and it's how you change your life. And so when I looked at my parents, I saw two people who were young and were just trying to figure it out step by step and doing the best possible thing they could do. And for me, that was pushing me towards education. But that education then gave me the ability to say, how can I help my parents who never had anyone, say, here's how you start a 401k, here's how you save for retirement. They are the generation of being between the pensions and the first of the 401ks, and they end up being lost when it comes to advice, because they just got thrown into this world like, oh yeah, here's a 401k. No one really taught us about stocks, bonds, mutual funds. It's not a conversation in school. And so when I was able to look at where they had come from and put myself in their shoes, they pushed me towards the best way they knew how to fill a void that no one taught them. Now, I can't say that they pushed me towards personal finance. That was a happenstance. But that idea of watching them, of where they struggled and what kind of things their parents taught them, both, when you have depressionary parents, they're the exact opposite, right? It was save every nickel, you never know. You have the stories of people saying, this is the last dollar our family has. And so when you look at each generation of what they went through, then you can start to identify what traits did they push down and what was happening in the world and the economy at that time that made them do that. And many times, especially with baby boomers, those are the first families that really went through divorces. And at that time, that was some big shame. So the financial shame of having parents that lived apart or parents that struggled, they almost went in that we're going to enjoy the life because it was a life either they had depression parents or divorces or widows and they didn't have that extra income. To baby boomers, we're going to enjoy every minute of our life and live to the fullest. That's where we saw Levi's come from and the VW vans. It was all about adventure and finding that new step. But with that, those passed down. And so we have to find those nuggets of what we've picked up. And what I picked up and what my brothers picked up aren't the same. We all have our own window. We all start with our own beginner mind. And so when you figure out that nugget, how did it affect me, then you can start to decide how you want to change that.
And then too, as you mentioned that, having your own beliefs and your own system, and then if you're married, then having that as well. So, if you have someone who's a saver or someone who is a spender and your own complex beliefs about your own relationship with money.
Yeah, and we all have our own way that we receive love too. And so, that idea that some people receive love by wanting gifts and giving gifts, and if you're in one of those and you're with someone who's a spender, that can be a very emotional thing for someone to understand. As if you're not on those same ideas of how do you feel happy in a marriage, and if you have someone who's spending and the other one's a saver, digging backwards into why are we spending, it's usually about the happiness or sometimes it's about depression or it's trying to fill a void. And so understanding where the two people are coming from. I had a story of someone telling me that the wife was going crazy over Christmas, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars for each one of the kids, and it was just over the top. And when they realized that growing up, Christmas was the only time that they got gifts. And so at Christmas, it was the time that she felt loved from those other family members. And so she did that to a full scale with her kids. And it took, again, digging back into that family tree of what is really causing this event to understand it was her way of showing love. And once she got the idea that there was other ways to do that, then it was able to calm down the spending that was attached to it.
So this is something that is your background, but are there tools or resources that someone can look to kind of examine their own behavior? Or is this something that they would do with a financial planner?
So there's definitely financial planners. There's also financial therapists out there. And so you can find plenty of books. There's Mind Over Money. There's The New Behavioral Investor. I mean, there's tons of personal finance books out there now that are on this topic. Looking at things like your money story, your moneygrams, those are where I always encourage people to start. Those are the easy things. Drawing your family tree or looking at what are your actual moneygrams. Those are usually a first start for people to go, oh, there is something here, and now I can take that next step.
We talked a little bit previously about broaching the subject of talking to seniors and when it's time to do that. Chandra, I wanted to ask you, how do you protect a senior from being taken advantage by a scam? I mean, sometimes I'll get an email or I'll get something in the mail and I just think, ugh. But then how do you protect seniors who might not be familiar with those things?
Well, we try to educate our caregivers and their family members, our client family members, on what to look for. We keep up with what the latest alerts are for people trying to scam seniors. We send out notifications to our paid caregivers and our clients' family members. So that's one way we do it. We also work with the families to care plan how we're going to handle phone calls and text messages and emails and the delivery of mail for our clients. Some of our clients are very independent and we have those conversations with them. And then we do have clients that do have dementia. And so we care plan that out so that it's an appropriate interaction. We always want our clients to be independent and we don't want to take over that independence. So we're very aware of that. But we keep them aware of what alerts that we get, and then we care plan that out with the client and the family members accordingly.
And then we talked about broaching that difficult subject, and there could be some detrimental things that happen if there's fear in having that actual conversation.
Well, a couple things I wanted to touch on as we were talking. I think the parent needs to feel independent, and they need to be the ones to remain in control. So some of the things I think children can do is help their parent enroll in getting their Social Security statement. I mean, I just got mine, and I always love to look at it and see, how much, I'm saving, and then, a great way is a person always wants to feel needed. So maybe you sit down with your parents and ask them, hey, can you help me understand my 401k? It starts the conversation, and you get an idea of your parents' knowledge in those subjects, and it can lead into a conversation about where they're at for their savings. So you always, the caregiver wants to stay in control, the family member, and the client do too. So you have to think very carefully and subtly about how to approach those topics and things.
Chandra, these are such good tips, helping the parent feel independent and just asking them can you help me understand this? I had some friends, and they had a series of incidents that happened. They said, we have to have this conversation. And the one where they said, okay, we can't put it off any longer, was where their mom took $2,000 out of the bank, and she brought it home, but she didn't know what she did with it. And so they found it, and it was in her home. So they had lots of concerns withdrawing the money, leaving it around, and having people come in and out. And so they had to have the conversation, but it didn't go so well. But if you can help a parent feel independent and have them be a part of the conversation instead of having the conversation be dictated to them, it sounds like that those are some tools that'll make it just go over so much more smoothly.
Yeah, it's hard to keep the emotion out of situations like that. But if you can, it's always best. First, I would have asked, Mom, why did you need $2,000? Can you walk me through that? And then, I forget where I put my keys all the time, or my cell phone, believe it or not. And so just instead of making them feel like they did something wrong, walking them through the steps of what's the first problem. The first problem is finding the money. So just go back through the steps. Let's walk back through your steps. And then having the conversation, hey, Mom, why'd you need $2,000? Is there something I can help you with? It's that not accusational approach. It's that kind approach. It's the non-emotional approach, because if it's just like an infant. If you're all tense as a parent, the infant senses that. And so as we grow older, parents sense when their children are tense, and they want to stay the parent, and they don't want to feel like their children are the parent. So just keep the emotion out of it as best you can, and how would you want to be treated in that situation is how I would recommend to the children or a caregiver when they're approaching their parent or loved one in that situation.
And then how can seniors or someone who's in that situation, as they're looking at handing over some control or getting some additional assistance, how can they ensure that their wishes are executed the way they want them to be executed?
Write them down. I can't stress that enough. We have people of all different ages, and so especially with dementia, I approach the conversation kindly and respectfully, but just write it down. And then, as you grow older, you can encourage your family member to talk with their financial advisors to put those things in place, talk to their attorneys to have their wills. All those types of things. And it's okay to let the parent go to the financial advisor by themselves, and it's okay to let them go to their attorney by themselves. Once again, a way to kind of break down those barriers is maybe you have your parent go with you to your financial advisor. Respect their life experience and their intellect, and show them that you still respect the guidance that they can give you. And I think then they would be more open to having you help guide them as they age.
So we did have someone monitoring our chat, and we do have a couple of questions to ask. The first question is, what is the simplest way for our aging parents to stay up to date on Medicare updates?
Well, unfortunately, the easiest way, of course, is to use the website, which whenever you say a government website, that instantly doesn't turn into the easiest way. But the Medicare, the Social Security websites, they really do have everything on them. They do a fantastic job of making sure all the updates are there. But honestly, like there's organizations that are there to help, and
Right.
those organizations usually are much better at digesting that information because the government websites can be a little bit difficult to find what you're looking for on them.
And when you're on those websites, you can decide what topics you want to receive notices on from that agency. So I wouldn't recommend signing up for everything, but really reviewing the web pages and deciding what topics are relevant to you and having them send you a notice when there's a change in policy or something you should be aware of.
Thank you. Okay, our next question. What are some of the most common financial problems you see in the aging population?
So the ones that I see most common, and these are by personality traits, I would say. I see the people who, like you said before, will spend it all. And so one of the issues with them is helping them realize that they are spending too fast. They're not keeping up with their rate of return. Their spending is outpacing, and that they won't be able to keep that up. And so that is a hard conversation to have. The flip side is I've also seen clients who won't spend anything because they're so fearful of running out of money. And so many of the conversations are dictated by the person, and they should be. If any conversation you go into is just a cookie cutter conversation, then it's not personalized to you. And so making sure that person's going through and actually looking at how much money do you spend per year, what rate of return both do you need from being able to make your money last, but to be comfortable with that. There's no point in us setting up a plan that is so full of risk you can't sleep at night, or has so little risk that you can't live your life. And so that they need to be in balance together. And then helping with those communications of how things change over time. So many people I see set something up when they retire, and maybe they're not financially, focused on, it's not their primary thing. They have interest around. Sometimes that's good and bad. They're not watching, the markets every day. That can be good, but it can also be bad if you're so withdrawn from the conversation of finance. And so helping that, at least checking in, going through, and your conversations can't just be around returns. It needs to be around your expenses, your taxes, what kind of wills and powers of attorney and trust do you have in place, or do you not have them? And your advisor should be helping you with those. And as someone ages, one of the things I always want to make sure we talk about is what kind of indicators do you have of when you would like me to encourage you to bring your children in or to bring your trusted person in? Would you like your advisor to talk with your CPA or other individuals? And keeping those lines of communication open, and the client having the control of when to bring in the other experts. That's really the role of the advisor, is to help be that person that connects all of the important financial people in their lives.
Do you have any tips for avoiding some of the pitfalls that you see?
The biggest pitfalls, yes. If you can stay open to the idea of talking about finances. And it's touchy. I said it earlier, finances tend to be one of those forever sins that you're not supposed to talk about. But if you can break that barrier and be more open to having those conversations, then you are more likely not to fall into them. Especially women. Women have a tendency to take the back seat when it comes to finances. Many times I have widows, divorcees that I'm talking to, who have never looked at the finances. The spouse always controlled it. And that is something we're seeing change in the younger generation. For sure, they are much more open to finding a financial advisor earlier, having those conversations. But for the older generations, getting involved before it's too late is incredibly important.
Is it ever too late to start financial planning, and is it ever too early?
Definitely never too early. Now, how much advice you need, will change over time. When you're younger, you might just need to come in and have a conversation of, here's my choices in my 401k. How do I allocate them? What does this mean? Or here's my employee benefits. Which ones do I check? It might just be a much lighter check-in to get you started. And there's other, if you're not comfortable doing it face-to-face, there's online options available now that were not available before. There's all sorts of custodians that have help. But starting early is by far the best thing anyone could possibly do. But it's never too late either. Every day that you delay is a chance that there's something important that you're missing. We were talking about taxes earlier. Every year I'm reviewing my clients' tax returns with them and what changes can they make this year to put themselves in a better position. Financial planning isn't just about the 30-year projection into the future. It's about what are you doing today to make your life better in the moments we're in.
Good advice. Well, because I see people who are in similar situations say, I'm going to buy a house now because the interest rates are so low. And then I hear other people say, oh, I'm not going to buy a house because I'm retiring in 10 years. And so someone to help you walk through that. So how do you find the right financial planner who's going to meet your goals? There's so many people out there.
There is, and everybody has different specialties. And so there's a few things I recommend everyone. There's the CFP board is the Certified Financial Planners. That is the board that is available across the country. So no matter where you are, you can look up the CFP board and find a certified financial planner in your area. If you're looking for someone who is more behavioral focused, like I said before, there's also financial therapist. So you could always look at the Financial Therapy Association. Broker Check is out there for anyone who is FINRA associated. You can look at Broker Check. Broker Check is fantastic because it's not only going to tell you who they're registered with, but it's going to tell you any kind of disclosures or claims they've had against them. And the same is true with the CFP board. But there's a lot of designations out there that are approved. There's certified divorce individuals, there's individuals who are more investment focused, so you'll find CFAs. And the unfortunate part, just like I was talking about the government website, sometimes is not easy to find things in. We like to make the joke in the financial industry, it's the alphabet soup of what does a person actually have. But looking at those designations, you're gonna find a whole lot of letters usually behind someone's name, and what do those letters mean? Because it's no different than, there's lots of doctors, but when you need a specialist, you need a specialist, and that is how the financial industry is as well.
Another question for you. What role does inflation play in financial planning?
The biggest, probably. That's probably going to be right up there with spending and how much of a rate of return are you having. So inflation right now, we've been fortunate. The last decade, we've been in a low inflationary period, but we all remember or have heard the stories of when the bond market inflation, you said low interest rates on houses. There was a time when people were paying 13 or 15% on houses, and so those inflationary periods work really well for our spending, our cost of living. That cost of bread hasn't went up as much, but there's other places where it hurts us. When you're looking at the fixed index market, we can't find bonds that are fixed, perfectly safe bonds that are going to pay you 8-10% like we did a few decades ago. And so that inflationary piece is a huge part of looking at it. In general, most people are looking somewhere 3.5% is what they're looking at, that long-term inflation. We've been lower than that for the last decade, and so it's worked in our favor. But inflation is different on all things, and so the inflation for your cost of bread versus a new car versus a vacation, they all grow at different rates. And so using a good inflation for figuring out how to forecast into the future is important, but you have to stay on top of it. Like I said before, it's going to change, and so looking at it over time and adjusting is a really important piece to look at.
Well, you guys have provided a wealth of information for us today and for us to think about and digest. So I would like to thank you for joining us today, Erin and Chandra from Carson Wealth and from Home Instead. And I'd also like to mention, coming up next month in our Home Instead Aging Well series, we have a special recognition in honor of veterans. That will be on November 11th, so we'll see you next month for that. Thank you so much for joining us today.